Eric Bolling and Brett Favre on everything from politics and sports to business and culture.
This year has been insane.
I got some advice for y'all. Take 2 weeks off, then quit.
That man right there, number 4, Brett Favre.
First NFL completion, and it's to himself.
It's big time and prime time.
That's why Brett Favre is Brett Favre.
Yep. Now it's Bolling with Favre.
All right, everyone, this is a big show. Brett, good to see you again, my friend. How excited are we to have the one and only Dr. Phil joining us in just a minute?
After going through a lot of the stuff I went through early in my life, I'm glad that I don't have to be grilled by Dr. Phil. But I'm a big fan. I really am a big fan. And I think because of what I went through and kind of seeing it from both sides.
Yeah, we'll get Dr. Phil to weigh in and exactly that. A lot of things that probably people don't know about you, about everyone. And folks, remember, if you're listening to the podcast right now, make sure you rate us and review us. That's the way we get seen. That's the way we get heard. We get on lists, and that'll help get the word out. Appreciate you. The week to week, our numbers are going up. We love you for that. Make sure you get the word out. Bolling with Favre. Go to Spotify. Go to iTunes. Rate and review us, or wherever you get your podcasts. So, Brett, without any further ado, let's bring in the man himself. You ready for this, Dr. Phil McGraw?
Ready. Born ready.
Well, this is a great day. We're honored. We love Dr. Phil McGraw. He's joining us, giving us some of his time. Appreciate your time. Dr. Phil, you and I go way back. We hung out a little bit, maybe a decade ago or so when I interviewed you over at Fox News, but haven't spoken to you since. And Brett and I are just thrilled that you're here. 19th season of the Dr. Phil Show. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to talk to both of you guys.
One more year, and you tied my 20-year. I played 20 years in the National Football League. I couldn't imagine doing it again. And for you, I've watched your shows many a times. And what a run. What an amazing run.
Well, it's been easier for me to do 20 than it was for you. I don't have I don't have 1,000 pounds of linemen landing on top of me.
Yeah, and going after you. Phil, we've done this. We've sat down with Adam Carolla. We sat down with Darius Rucker last week. And one of the most interesting things, and I think our audience doesn't really get to hear this very often and hear it on this podcast. How did you get started? What was the impetus? What was the first? How did you walk into it? Did you know it was coming? Did you know right away you're going to be successful?
Well, it's interesting because I never had any aspirations whatsoever to be on television or radio or anything at all. In fact, I was in the trial science business where we worked with litigators in the litigation arena. And for 15, 20 years, I never gave one word of interview. I mean, I'd be at a big trial, somebody would say, who are you and why are you inside the rail up there with all of these lawyers? And I'd say, I'm not even here. I'm not even here. I never gave a single word of interview. And then one of the trials I did, I was defending Oprah in what became known as the Mad Cow case up in Amarillo, Texas. Y'all remember that, where she got sued by the cattle growers up there?
Yeah.
And so I worked with Oprah for 2 or 3 years leading up to and during the pendency of that trial. And after it was all over with, and we had a really good result, but after it was all over with, a couple months later, I got a call from a producer at Oprah, and they said, hey, Oprah would really like you to come be on the show. And I said, yeah, no, I'd really rather not. I got some other stuff scheduled for them, but I'll give you the name of some people that I think would be really good. And they said, oh, well, okay. About 20 minutes later, Oprah calls and she said, you don't say no to Oprah. She was just dying laughing. She said, you don't say no to Oprah. And I said, well, I'm going scuba diving with my boys. And she said, well, how about we wait till you get back? And I said, well, okay. And I went in and did a show, and as the old saying goes, the rest is history. I then started doing every Tuesday on Oprah for 4 or 5 years, and then we launched the Dr. Phil Show. And we were going to do it in Chicago, and then we decided to do it out here in LA instead. So, and as you just said, we're in our just finishing up our 19th season. So it's been a great run. I really enjoy it.
You still stay in contact with Oprah?
I do. I talk to her really often, frequently. We email and talk on the phone and see each other because she lives in Santa Barbara, just north of here. So we're able to connect quite often.
Have you spoken to her since the big Harry and Meghan interview?
I have not. I haven't talked to her since then, but I watched the interview and thought she, as usual, did a great job.
So you watch the interview, and you're a doctor, and you see things. I watch the show, and you see things that regular people don't see before they happen out of these guests that you bring on. If Meghan and Harry were on your set and you were talking, what did you see that we didn't see? Because there's got to be something that you picked up that maybe the media didn't, or the general public didn't.
Well, I watched Oprah the most, and I was impressed with how, an interesting thing, I think you would notice it with me as well, because I kind of learned this from Oprah. You would be amazed how little she says during an interview. If you just did a word count, how few words she speaks during the interview, and lets the people tell their story and lets them talk. And I was really impressed with how little she said with open-ended questions and let them speak. And I was surprised that as much time was spent with just Meghan first and then adding Harry afterwards. I thought that was interesting. I don't ascribe any particular meaning to it, but I thought it was kind of interesting. And I thought they were both, really well spoken. And I'm not a big follower of the royals or what that life is like. So I don't have much of an opinion on it or what she went through at all. But I think they both seem to be doing okay now.
But, as a therapist, you saw Meghan Markle drop kind of a bomb there, and Oprah was shocked. I mean, you could see she was shocked. She said, whoa, wait a minute. This whole, racial insensitivity from the crown, from England. Did you see in the aftermath of that, Piers Morgan walks off a set because he questioned Meghan's sincerity? And I'm not asking you to do that, but did you see anything as a therapist that may give you raise a red flag on what Meghan was saying there, that it may not be as dramatic as we are all understanding it to be right now? No,
for me to express an opinion on something like that, I would have to know the context in which it was said, who said it, and kind of what was the background, the context in which it was said. And I don't think we have very much information about it. So it's hard to really know what the intent was or the context in which it was said. So I don't really have an opinion on it one way or the other.
Gotcha.
Obviously we're on a podcast and we're in the infant stages of our podcast, but you have a podcast, Fill in the Blanks, which I love the name. Now, it's been quite a while since you've done a show. Is it still there? You just preoccupied with other stuff?
No, it is. I went on hiatus. I put it on hiatus when we stopped last season. I was going to put it on hiatus for the summer, and then we were in quarantine, and it just got really, really busy. And so now that things are loosening up, the next episode of Fill in the Blanks will be the last week of April or the first week of May. I've got about 15 or 20 interviews that I've done over the last couple of months in the can. So I always like to get way ahead in case I get diverted and I don't
have to go scuba diving.
Exactly. I don't want to be caught with nothing. So I always tape ahead, and I've now got enough cushion. So I'll drop the first one either last week of April or first week of May.
You talk about going on hiatus in this whole year of basically quarantining and just pulling ourselves out of society, flipping us on our ear. Phil, I see, last week, 8 people shot and the Atlanta killed. This Yesterday, Colorado, 10 people killed. I'm watching spring break in Miami, just mayhem, craziness going on. Do you think this is some sort of acting out by the population because we've been held down? We've been stuck in our apartments, our homes for so long?
I wish that was the case, because that would mean that we'd see a spike and then maybe it would go away when everybody got released. But if you look at the pattern of mass shootings and school shootings and the kind of violence that you're describing, it's sadly, tragically, pretty consistent year in and year out. I mean, these things happen so much so now that they oftentimes just don't make big headlines. 5, 6 people get shot at a mall or a gathering at a home somewhere. It just doesn't even really make big headlines anymore. And I think that's just heartbreaking. And so I really don't think that it's.
So what do you think it
letting off
is?
steam after the quarantine. I think it was happening before the quarantine. I think it happened during the quarantine. I think it was just a little bit less while everybody was locked away because there wasn't such a target-rich environment.
So what's happening? What's happening in American society right now that we're killing as many of our own people as we are?
I think it's a lot of frustration, and I think people are, really, really hurting. And I think there's always, from my standpoint, I look at it from a psychological standpoint, and I think every time you catch a shooter or you look at the background of the shooter, you almost always find out that person felt marginalized in some way. They felt they didn't fit in. They felt rejected. When you look at the research, it's not uncommon that they had suffered a loss from a loved one fairly recently before it took place, that maybe a longtime girlfriend or a wife had rejected them, or they lost their children through divorce. They lost their job. They just really felt like they were disenfranchised and didn't have a way to fit into the world. The number one need of all people is acceptance, belongingness. You feel like you belong, that you're wanted, that you're part of something. And the number one fear is rejection or failure, and those are the same thing to me. If you open a business and you fail, you've been rejected by the world. They don't want what you have to offer. And the common thing that we see among these shooters is they almost always have been marginalized in some way leading up to that shooting. And when that happens, and they don't have a way to express themselves or a way to get back into their lives. And of course, that's a post hoc analysis. And let me tell you what I mean when I say that, because it's a big frustration to me. Not everybody that's marginalized and loses their place in the world is a shooter, but most shooters are marginalized. So it's not like you can predict it before it happens. You just come in after the fact and observe that was the case. Because they ask you, why don't we pick these things out psychologically? Why don't we have a test where we can say this person's going to be a mass killer or serial killer or a mass killer? We just don't have the devices to do that with. We just don't. We can't screen people for firearms or something with those tests because we just don't have that good a test.
Phil, so I'm watching the aftermath of the Atlanta shooting where 8 people are dead. 6 of them were Asian Americans who were killed. And immediately the knee-jerk reaction was, well, this was it was a hate crime, right? There was some real smart people in the past week or so since this happened who pointed out that this was more likely a crime against sex workers than it was against specifically Asian people. What do you think? There's a difference, right? There's a distinction there. Shouldn't we talk about this? Was it a hate crime in your opinion? Do you think it was a crime against people? And apparently the young man who did this was very angry about him being tempted by these massage parlors.
Right. And I think as time goes, as time passes, I think the details of that will unfold, and there will be a psychological trail that will tell you whether this was him being tempted by these people. And then you'll find out, was he particularly tempted by Asian sex workers, or was it sex workers in general? And you will find that out, because when you start unpacking his history, there will be, you'll find a trail. He'll have written something, there'll be drawings, he'll have talked to other people, and you'll be able to find out. And I think people need to kind of slow the roll and find out exactly what was going on. And of course, to the families, the loss is just as tragic, whatever the reason he did it for, whether it was one or the other. But I think when you start to do a psychological autopsy on someone that's committed that kind of a crime, there's always a pattern. There's always a trail that tells you why they did what they did.
Mm-hmm. One more quick one, I'll let Brett jump in here, but moving to the Colorado shooting, again, Phil, was an AR-15 that was used, and immediately there are a lot of verified blue check marks on Twitter that was saying this guy must be white, because this is the gun that's been used by, as you point out, disenfranchised white men who shoot a lot of places up and have in history. I guess in their defense, that has happened quite a bit. It turns out, allegedly, or according to the name, or some accounts are that he has a Muslim name, and he's likely not a white guy with an AR-15. Are we jumping to conclusions? You said slow your roll. Should we all just take a deep breath and slow our roll?
We're in a 30-minute news cycle these days, Eric. You know that because you've been so prominent in the news gathering and reporting machine. And because we're in a 30-minute news cycle, it changes, and people are wanting to get the scoop, wanting to get the information, and wanting to get it out there. And so there is no due process in news. They just want to get the next piece of information out there before somebody else does. And I think that drives law enforcement crazy. And I do think you have to slow your roll on this stuff and find out, who did what to who and why. And I think it's important to get that right, because people react to it a whole lot. And if people are going to get out and start reacting, they need to be sure they know what the hell they're reacting to and be accurate about it. And I think it's really important that due process takes its course.
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to that, and we're talking about guns, and I'm an avid hunter. And there's those who are for guns, and there's those that are against guns. And certainly an event like this doesn't bode well for the gun enthusiast. But don't you, what's your take on banning guns versus what we have now?
Well, my theory and my fear is, I look at people walking around with AR-15s, fully automatic weapons, and I can't think of a good reason that people need to have a fully automatic assault rifle in Denver or Cleveland or just walking around the city. It doesn't make sense to me. But I think if we do away with the Second Amendment, I think what you're going to do is take away guns from all the law-abiding citizens. And the only people that are going to have them then are the criminals. Right. Because they're not, the criminals aren't going to say, oh, it's against the law to have a gun now, I'll go turn mine in. They're the last ones that are going to give their guns up. So I doubt
they bought it in Bass Pro Shops.
What's that?
And I doubt that they went to Bass Pro Shops and bought their gun.
Hardly. I hardly think they went in there and signed up all the stuff and took their picture and
Right.
all that. So I do worry about we're going to disarm the good guys and leave the bad guys with the guns. But I don't think there's an easy answer. That's what I was talking about before. People have asked me, shouldn't you psychologically screen these people? What about the psychotics? Well, interestingly enough, that population is not a particularly violent population. The psychological profiles on those people, they're not particularly violent. So it just doesn't predict. But I think it's a very slippery slope if you start doing away with the Second Amendment. Very uncomfortable.
I agree.
Selfishly, I think they should take away everybody's guns but mine. Let me keep mine. Everybody else turn theirs in.
Yeah, the biggest advocates for gun control are being protected by security guards who are packing heat to make sure they're safe. Phil, can I back up a little bit to this whole year of pandemic? Something close to my world. My son passed away from an accidental opioid overdose in college, and Brett's been outspoken about the opioid epidemic in his life as well. I saw some preliminary numbers for the last year, and they look like the numbers of drug deaths, specifically opioid overdose deaths, are soaring, absolutely soaring. Will this be a spike because we've all been stuck home, and will it go down, or are we creating a new normal here of deadly pandemic?
Well, I think that it is going up, and it's going up not just with prescription opioids, but it's also going up with heroin, because what's happening is a lot of people are getting prescription opioids. They get addicted to those, and then they get harder to get, or they're expensive, and heroin is much cheaper. So we have a whole new group, a whole new category of heroin addicts. We used to think about them as being the people kind of living on the street and getting their drugs in the alley. We now have suburban heroin addicts that started out with opioids after an operation or after dental work or after something that they got it for legitimately. But then they got where they couldn't get them, or they were too expensive, so they switched over to heroin. And I think it's a serious problem. And I know that there are projections from government agencies now that between 2015 and 2027, that there could be as many as 500,000 deaths from opiate overdose. And I mean, something's got to happen to change that. And by the way, I'm very sorry for your loss, Eric. I don't want that to just slide by. I can't even imagine what you went through with that. I'm very, very sorry.
Thank you.
And along those same lines, it didn't happen overnight, but it was scary how quickly I became addicted, and harmlessly. I played a sport that, as you know, is violent, and there are going to be injuries. And I separated my shoulder against Philadelphia in Milwaukee. And it just so happens that the guy who tackled me was Reggie White, who became my teammate. And separated my shoulder, 3rd-degree separation. I got it shot up at halftime. But after the game, I took a couple of Vicodin ES, what I was given.
Right.
And it sort of numbed the pain, but it also felt pretty good. And so I found that if that pain lingered, if you know what I mean, I could get more pills.
Right.
And that's it. And it snuck up on me. It was 2 pills that gave me a buzz, and then it was 4. And at its peak, I was taking 16 Vicodin ES all at one time.
Oh my gosh.
I know it would kill any person who tried to do that, including me, if I were to do it now. But all this pandemic, and granted, I know people have died, and it has been a serious issue. But I think we pay more attention to the virus the COVID, and less attention to opiate addiction, cancer, things that are here to stay. Obesity. Mississippi is terrible with obesity and diabetes. It kills so many people. And I feel like everyone's focus has been narrowed down to COVID, that all the other things are just secondary. And we know that that's not the case.
Well, it's not the case, and it's not just the medical side, it's the psychological as well. But, you talk about taking those pain pills, and there are some really chilling statistics about that, because the statistics are if you fill your prescription one time at the end of 7 days, your chance of being addicted at the 1 year mark is 1 in 12. Wow. If you fill it at the end of 30 days, your likelihood of being addicted at the 1 year mark is 33%.
Wow.
So that's how addictive that these opioids are. And people just don't realize this at 30 days. So they give you a prescription that covers you for a couple of weeks and you renew it once. So at 30 days, you're still taking them. You got a 1 in 3 chance that you're going to be an addict at the end of a year, which means you've been taking them for 12 months by that time. That's how difficult it is. And people have really looked away from that. I testified before a bipartisan committee before Congress about just this and how addictive it is. But you're right, during this quarantine, people have been slow to go get examined, which means we're now having doctors that intervene later. So cancer has maybe advanced 2 or 3 months before a doctor saw it. And we know early detection is the number one tool in fighting it, or people have skipped treatments.
Yeah.
So heart disease has advanced, cancer has advanced, and the mortality rates go up because of that. And psychologically, just loneliness. People that suffer from loneliness. I mean, the death rate goes up among those people. It just has a depression, anxiety, loneliness. I believe the psychological effects of this year-long quarantine, when it's all said and done, the deaths that result from all of those factors will outstrip the deaths from the coronavirus itself.
Can I ask Brett, and I never asked you this before, and maybe Phil, I have a question for you too. Brett, what made you stop? I mean, so many of these people who have found themselves addicted, there's an event, I would think, that it comes to your mind that made you stop.
So 1994 was when it started. Now, I had taken pain pills before that, not necessarily football injuries. But when I first realized that I liked the pain pill was after that Philadelphia game in 94. And it wasn't the next time I got injured, for example, may have been 3 weeks later, and I sprained my ankle. I don't know if it was sprained enough to warrant getting pain pills, but I remembered the effect that I had.
Right.
And I liked it. And I thought, what the heck? Why not? So that happened 2 or 3 times during the course of that season, to a point where, like Dr. Phil said, then I was taking 2 every day, and I could get away with getting 2 a day because it was 2. And maybe the third day I would ask another player to get 2 pills. So I just didn't ask the same person. And you start learning to manipulate the system, and you become very good at it. And to a point where I was basically taking in 2 days a month prescription, which is crazy. But it became constant at the end of 94 season, to where when I went home, I was taking the pills. And usually after a month, 2 became 3, 3 became 4, 4 became, it would only last for 4 weeks, and then I had to go up. And so during the 95 season, I had a seizure the night before a game, a all-out seizure. Now, for lack of a better description, when I met with the neurologist there in Green Bay, basically what he said in layman's terms was your lack of sleep has short-circuited your system, and that's what contributed to the seizure. I'd never had a seizure before that. And so as they dug deeper, he found out that I had an addiction to pain pills. But I didn't tell him how much. And so I said, okay, I'll stop taking them. But I continued to take them to a point where at the end of the 95 season, I had ankle surgery and had another seizure in the hospital. That scared me. My wife and my oldest daughter, our youngest daughter was not born at the time, were in the hospital when it happened. When I woke up, there were doctors everywhere, and I was looking around. I said, what's going on? And they said, you had a seizure. And I thought to myself, again. So then it had to come to Jesus, really. I had to tell everyone what was going on. But really, I knew I had to stop. And I went to rehab in Topeka, Kansas, the Menninger Clinic, and I was there for 75 days. I thought I had it all figured out. I fought them. That's why I was there 75 days. At 28 days, they were like, you ain't going nowhere. And I said, bullshit, I'm going somewhere. And the league said, if you don't stay, you don't play. So I stayed to a point where I finally, I figured out, agree with what they're saying. In other words, manipulate again. And then when I got out, I continued to do what I was doing. And really it came to a head. I had 8 pills.
So Brett, you got out and then went back to gather
Not right
pills.
away, but I did. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll tell you this, so when I got out, I was fit. This was 96 season. We're going to play we didn't know, but we ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. And they said, okay, if you need pain pills, we got a non-addictive pain pill that you can take. It's called Ultram. And I'd never heard of it before. And Dr. Phil probably knows about it. Well, let me tell you, if you take 20 of them, it will work. I'm obviously in no way telling someone to take 20 of them, but that's the addictive nature that I was going through. I tried them. It didn't really, I can't say it helped with pain or not, but I was taking a pain pill for effect. And eventually I took 20 and I got a buzz. And so I fell right back into that cycle again. So at the end of the season, I had 8 pills in my possession. 8 pills would not do what I needed it to do. It would give me 0 buzz. And I was home in Mississippi, and I was as low as I possibly could be, even though I'd won the Super Bowl, won an MVP, actually won 3 MVPs in a row. And during this whole time, I hadn't slept a bit, like maybe an hour a night. Wow. It's crazy. But I was low. I felt, I was, and I said, it's one of 2 things. I die or I flush these pills down the toilet. And I contemplated, I sat by the toilet for 2 hours. And eventually I dumped the pills in the toilet, flushed them. And I almost wanted to kill myself because of doing that I could not believe that I had actually done that. And I was so mad at myself because now what was I going to do? And actually I spent probably the next 2 weeks. It was really not the way you want to come off of pain pills because it could kill you. I shook with cold sweats, hot sweats. Every night at 9 o'clock, I just shook because every night at 9 o'clock was exactly the time I took them. No matter where I was, what I was doing, I would take the pills at 9 o'clock. So that was the last time.
So after 2 weeks, that was it. You were clean.
I was clean. It took me probably a couple of months to where I started getting over I want these pain pills really bad, that urge.
Yeah, the desire was still there, but
the desire was there, but slowly but surely, by the grace of God, I got beyond. And the same thing for drinking. I still maintain my alcohol. And I was one of those, Dr. Phil, and I know you hear it all the time. I didn't drink every day, so I don't have a problem.
Right.
How ridiculous is that statement? It was when I drank what I did. Did I drink one beer and go home? I thought, what a waste. Why drink one beer? Why not drink 20? That's a problem.
Yeah, you put on a clean shirt, so I mean, you might as well give it your all, right?
Might as well. And I did.
Makes sense at the time, and next thing you know, you're shit faced, and there you go.
And you're driving, or you're making some other idiot decision, taking other drugs, street drugs, which I did all that. And I went back to rehab for alcohol. And ironically, the day before I went back to rehab to Topeka, Kansas for alcohol, I said, I quit. I was low again. I was not taking pain pills, but I'm drinking. And I'm not drinking all the time, but I knew I had a problem because it was what I did when I drank, the choices I made. And so I said, I am not drinking anymore. My wife said, I don't want to hear it. I've heard it so many times. And I said, you're right. I'm going to go to rehab. And I'm not saying rehab is not for everyone. It is, and some people it isn't. I went to please her and to show everyone that I was serious, but I was not going to drink again. And I haven't taken a drop since 1998.
Phil, can I ask you, Phil, you listen to Brett, and I watch your show and I hear you listen to people and you're able to pick out, moments and things. Have you yourself ever had to deal with an addiction to a drug or alcohol or anything?
Well, I've had to deal with it in this sense. My father was a really bad alcoholic. And when I say bad alcoholic, I mean, he had Wednesday afternoons off, and every Thursday morning I had to not go to school because I had to go find the car. It was somewhere in Kansas City. I had to go find it. And it was a kind of situation where, you'd come home and he had ripped the vent hood off of the range in the kitchen and used it to knock all the windows out of the house. And I can remember as far back as we lived in Denver when I was in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And when you have an alcoholic father, particularly one that's really animated and volatile when they're drinking, you just don't bring friends home, because you never know you're going to walk in and all the windows are kicked out of the house or whatever. And I remember one night walking up to the house, and it was February and it was cold out. And I saw something in the driveway, and it was pretty windy, so I figured something had blown up. And I had some friends with me, and we were going to walk past my house to another friend's house. And in my driveway, my dad was laying there in his underwear with his pillow. He was hot in the house, laying in bed. So it just made perfect sense to him. He got up in February in Denver and went outside and laid down in the driveway with his pillow, and he was asleep out there. So I grew up with all of that. And I made the decision real early on, I just wasn't going to do it. And so I haven't had a drink since high school. I tried to get drunk once in high school, and I'll be damned, I got hungover while I was drinking. It wasn't like you got at least a little while, you have some fun, and then you get hungover. I'd drink a beer and feel like I got hit in the head with an axe. Now, of course, it was hot beer, and it was in the trunk at school, so I didn't give it probably a fair test, which was okay. But I've never been able to get drunk, and I guess that's a good thing because I haven't had a drink for 50 years. I saw what it did to him and what it did to our family, and it was so disgusting to me. I just never wanted to have anything to do with it.
Yeah. Can we we only have a few more minutes with Dr. Phil. Appreciate your time again, Phil. I watch your show and I watch how you take people apart. You take families, but people, when they lie to you, you know it, and you look them in the eye. Do you ever feel uncomfortable calling these people out? Do you ever feel pity and empathy for these people while you're being very tough with them?
Well, Eric, that's a fair question. And, I never confront anyone to just be confronting. I just finished a show with a young man that was very violent with his wife. And I mean, just a real violent situation, and had an unbelievably bad temper. And if you watch that show, you would think, what is he doing? But his comfort zone is anger and in your face and rah, rah, rah. And so I went at him in a very different way and said, look, you've been judged all your life. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to understand you. Let's figure this out, because I know you don't want to do this. And I mean, he just burst into tears and said, I don't know why I do this. I hate myself for it. I don't want to defend it. I'm not here to justify it. I don't know why I do this. I absolutely hate myself. And I had an expert scan his brain yesterday, and we found excessive scarring in his brain. We just got it back during the show, and sure enough, he had excessive scarring in the neocortex of his brain that involves the epicenter of control for anger and anxiety, and it explained exactly why he couldn't pump the brake on this kind of thing. So, I try to meet people where they are, and sometimes those that their comfort zone is confrontation, you're better off to go at them in a different way. And I just try to do what works with somebody to get their attention and initiate a change chain to get them started in that direction. And so it's really just a matter of figuring out the best way to enter somebody's rational mind and get them to acknowledge things that they need to acknowledge, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. If you've ever talked to a drunk about their drinking while they're drunk, you know what I mean. There's no point in doing that. You got to wait till they sober up and then talk to them. And so I try to get people to really listen. And I have to say, in all the time I've been doing this, I've never had anybody get aggressive with me or get violent or anything, because I think they know I'm coming from a sincere place, and they've never had anybody work harder for them to try to get them what they want and get them where they need to be. And I think, don't people know the truth when they hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're worried about, you went to the doctor and they said, we need to get an x-ray on this. It doesn't look right to me. And you got to wait the weekend to get the results. And people come along, pat the back of their hand. Oh, it's going to be fine, honey. You'll be good. That person gives you no comfort. The person that comes up and says, look, we don't know what this is, but whatever it is, we're going to deal with it. You've got a good doctor. You got a good support system. We'll deal with this. We'll meet it head on. That's the person you believe. They're not blowing smoke. They're telling you, look, it's early. We'll deal with it. And I think people know the truth when they hear it. And I think I tell people the truth.
Yeah, and sometimes, and I found that out, and I know you know this, in over 50 years of experience, as you said, starting back in high school, you gain a lot of experience, whether you like it or not, for later on in life. And your experiences definitely changed your life. But sometimes people have to be told matter of factly, the truth, or, the hard truth. And like me in rehab, I mean, I thought I was going to manipulate the system in the rehab facility. Yeah. Well, they had heard it and seen it so many times. And they're like, we don't play that.
Yeah, I tell parents I could write the first letter you're going to get from rehab before they ever show up. come get me. I'm not like the rest of these people. There's more drugs in here than there are on the street. I'm in the wrong place. This is bullshit. Come get me.
Absolutely.
It should be a form letter. You just sign it and send it out. It's the same one from everybody. But, I really think I'm blessed in that I can honestly say that I think everything I've ever done has prepared me for what I'm now doing. I'm not glad that my dad was an alcoholic, but it certainly prepared me to deal with people who grow up in that situation. I was homeless when I was 14 for about a three-month period, and I'm not glad of that, but I can relate to those people who are in that situation. I've done poor. I know how to do it. It doesn't scare me. I've been there. It's your life experiences. If I was selling shrimp out of a van down by the river, none of that would matter. But since I'm talking to people from all walks of life, it's good to have had experiences from a lot of different walks of life.
Going back to selling shrimp on the river doesn't sound too bad sometimes, does it?
Boy, I tell you what, no personnel, no occupancy cost, just you and the shrimp down by the river.
You know who that doesn't sound bad to? Everyone except the guy who's down by the river selling shrimp.
Exactly.
He wants to trade places with Dr. Phil, Brett Favre, Bolling. Dr. Phil, we really, really do appreciate your time. Awesome to see you again, my friend. Long time. And from Brett, you want to final word, Brett?
I just wanted to thank Dr. Phil. I've always been a fan. I think due in part because of what I went through. When I would listen to your show or watch your show, I could relate. And you were always you were on point with just like they were with me. And again, I'm a big fan. It was great to have you on.
Well, that means a lot. I have a lot of respect for both of you guys, and you owe me one now, so you're going to have to be on fill in the blanks here soon, and we'll continue our conversation.
Consider it done. Consider it booked.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys are very generous to have me on. I've really enjoyed it, and we'll continue this on the other side.
Absolutely. Phil McGraw, everybody. And again, Dr. Phil, congratulations on season 19 and 19 more to you, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Doc.
Well, man, Favre, this has been a great show. I think our listeners learned a lot, maybe a lot about you, also about Dr. Phil. Fantastic show. Appreciate you, being so forthcoming and honest with your past. It's really refreshing.
I think it's my duty to help others, and definitely in a time where it's needed. It's gotten so much worse than even when I was taking pain pills. So, thanks to Dr. Phil for enlightening us on his thoughts. And I'm hoping that if I save one person, then I did my job.
Yeah, you know what that makes you, my friend? MVP, not of the NFL, but MVP, most valuable podcaster in America right now.
Never thought I'd hear it, but
I love it.
See you next week, everybody.